So I'd like to go ahead and add the lowercase mod onto my hacked TRS-80 Model 1. This is the one in an earlier video we converted over to use an interconnect cable I can remove. This is obviously the PC board for the one, and I don't know if you can see it here, but one of the 2102s is already in a socket. I don't know that that's the correct one to do the lowercase piggyback mod on or not, but I'm going to find out. I want the mod in this to be the same mod I've got in my little workhorse TRS-80. It's the one that seems to have all the factory options installed. So I'm going to open that one up, take a look inside. Part of the reason I want to reference the workhorse one is there's a lot of different schematics I see on the web for doing lowercase mods. Those can be enabled and disabled, etc. And I'd like this one to mimic that one, make them more interchangeable. I'm happy with the performance of the lowercase mod in the workhorse unit, so I figure it's a good direction to go for this one. So let me set this board aside and retrieve my workhorse system. It's been a great little system. We will spin it around here, pull the screws out. As a reminder, the screws are different lengths, the short ones in the front being towards the front of the computer when you're using it, the medium ones here to the sides, and the longest ones to the back. If you try to put the long ones in the front and you drive them home, you will punch up through the plastic in the case and you'll be very unhappy. All 6 screws have been removed. Now, if I can get lucky, I'll be able to just pick the bottom of the case up, like so, and not have to tear the system all the way down. I will, of course, have to flip it apart to put it back together. So I can see that the lowercase mod is sitting right here. I can see that there's 2 wires coming off of it, which is what I expected to see based on what I had saw in the schematic that I think is the schematic that we want to clone. I've got the other processor board here, and I can see that indeed this guy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me bring this board in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the socketed 2102 on the board I want to modify is in the proper position as compared to this board here. So I do believe this is the mod where it's simply the piggyback, a single trace cut, and a couple of jumper wires. There are, though it's probably hard to see, 2 jumper wires here. There's a green one back here that kind of blends into the printed circuit board, and this red one. I'm going to take some high-res photos of this, compare it to the schematic I found on the web, see if it matches, and then I'll go make these same mods on the other board. So I've been thinking about doing the lowercase mod on this system. This is the recent eBay purchase that I actually bought to be able to hack on. I took a look at the lowercase mod in my workhorse TRS-80, my other system, and it looks to me like it is essentially it is the electric pencil mod, which is what this is here. You piggyback a second memory chip, the data in, data out pins get bent up. You grab the data in from the from Data 8, wherever you can get to Data 8, which happens to be there. And for the electric pencil mod, they actually used a switch that either went ahead and closed the cut trace here back down to turn it into the non-lowercase mod, or brought the data out back to the character generator so that you could get lowercase. In my system, other system, this switch was never actually put in. It's just simply a permanent lowercase mod. For my needs so far, that has been fine. I've read there's a couple of programs that might cause problems with. If I encounter those at some point, I'll take a look. So anyhow, I'm going to do this very similar to the way the other system was done. So in taking a quick dig through some of my chip storage, it turns out I have a large number of 2102s here, and then all kinds of 2114s and DRAMs and all kinds of stuff. This is just kind of reclaimed parts from over the years. Mostly memory there, just so you can get a peek. And microprocessors and peripherals and all kinds of stuff here. And I've got 5 more trays like this, loaded with parts, and then some other storage as well. So I'll pull out those 2102s and we'll hack away. So I picked a couple of suitable 2102s out of my parts bin there, have taken a couple quick looks, and I know that on one of these I need to bend pins 11 and 12 out. We've got pins 1 through 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those 2 pins will be out. All the rest of the pins will be piggybacked and soldered to the other chip. So I'll go ahead and get this set up to do that. I will need a little pair of needle nose. These will work. The pins in this guy are already a little bit, how you doing? I think that's going to be the top one just because of the way that one pin is bent. We're going to take pin 11 and bend it out. We're going to take pin 12, sorry I was off camera there, and bend it out. These 2 pins are where the jumper wires will go. The one device is going to be set down on top of the other one. We've got them crimped together, and then we are going to solder where the pins overlap all the way around here. We're going to solder all of those together. Doing this will be a little bit tricky. I think I'm going to go ahead and think about how to hold this. To kind of hold this in place. Let me find a better way to hold this and I'll be back. So I've actually dug out my pair of helping hands. I rarely use these, but in this case I will. I'm going to bend those leads up out of the way. The alligator clips are actually holding the plastic bodies of the 2 packages together well. Grab the soldering pencil here and a bit of solder. And we want to be careful not to get solder down low on the actual leads of the device or it won't fit well into the socket. I of course need to put on glasses that give me a little bit better vision up close, and we will just tack these together. 1, oops. That is the pins on that side. Go ahead and pull it out. Flip it around so we can see the pins on the other side. And we will do the same thing on this side. There's really no good way to place this to give you the best visibility, but there you're at least kind of up against the paper for contrast. And there we've created the piggyback set of 2102s. Now, because I had plenty of 2102s, I chose to leave the one that I know was working actually in the board, in the socket. And these are two that see, we're out of the parts bin, and that way I know I have that good one left currently in the socket on the board, just in case this doesn't work. I can get back to a known good state. So next step in this is to attach a couple of leads onto these pins to jumper out. So let me get some wire and we'll do that next. So in a lot of my previous work, I've actually used a method called wire wrapping, where you're actually using this thin wire and you are wrapping the wire around the posts of wire wrap sockets to make connections. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and use that stripper tool you just saw me use, and if I can get it into the wire wrap tool, the tool to just kind of make a bit of a wrapped connection onto the pins. It just gives me a little cleaner connection. There's of course a fair amount of extra wire there, but after I solder it, I will trim that down. I'm also going to use red and white wires here just because it'll give us a little more contrast when it's in circuit, just to make it a little bit easier to see what we've done here. So I've got the white wire loaded into the tool. I'm onto the other pin. Now normally with wire wrapping like this, you're wrapping onto a square post, and the idea is when the wire is tightly wrapped around those square edges on the posts, it creates a gas tight connection. These of course aren't square posts, and I am going to go ahead and solder these. The wrapping just simply gave me a good mechanical connection, so I will solder what I just wrapped together. A little shot of solder, a little shot of solder, and we now have a good mechanical connection along with a good electrical connection. I'm going to trim these back to a reasonable length. And I'm going to call that good. So you can see I've got the red and white wires coming off those two pins. Those pins are floating here, not connected to the data in and data out pins of the chip below. And looking at all the piggyback connections, there's what looks to me to be good solder joints on them all. So the next step will be to take this and install it into the board itself and to make a single trace cut in the board. So we will do that next. So the next bit here is to remove the 2102 that I was lucky enough to have already socketed when I acquired this TRS-80. If not, I would be using my desoldering station, a tool to unsolder the pins and hopefully remove the 2102 that was in there. If I wasn't able to easily get it cleanly out, I would be cutting all the leads away from the package, pulling the leads out, and cleaning the holes out. As I've mentioned before, I would rather sacrifice a replaceable part versus take a chance on lifting traces on the printed circuit board. So there's our 2102 that is targeted for this socket. Oops. I just managed to bend a pin. So the pins are a little bit crazy on this device. It's been in and out of other sockets in the past. Let's see if I can get it to actually go into this socket. I'm going to have to bend the pins a little bit more. And that didn't work well. See, the pins are flayed a bit. I probably should have thought about getting the pins aligned so I could get an easy insertion in the socket before I soldered the two devices together, but it's one of those things I didn't think about. So something that might actually be useful for you to think about if you do this mod yourself. I got one side to go in, but not the other. At least not as clean as I would like. I'm going to back him up out of there. Well, as you can see, I'm rather struggling here, but that's okay. That's what this is about. I'm going to take, part of what's happening here is because I've doubled up pins on the devices, there's a lot more strength. They don't flex as easy as they would if it was a single chip, because you're trying to flex up through that solder joint into the other chip. Boy, it is so close. It's just a little bit unhappy. There we go. We're into the socket. I'm going to do a visual look. I don't see any pins bent under. I believe we're now in. The lead off of pin 10 comes around to a plate through over here. It looks like the length of the wire as it exists is good to get over there. I probably should have checked that first, but I didn't. I'm going to trim this down to a length that'll be good to go through that little via. Add a dab of solder on the via. Put on my other glasses so I can actually see what I'm doing. Go ahead and do just what I did. Simply let the solder, loosen the solder and push the wire down through the via. I probably have a little bit of wire poking through, and I do underneath, but it's fine. It's not long enough to cause any issues. There is a trace cut to be made on here. The trace cut is where the line goes into the character generator. The character generator is in the socket here. The trace to be cut is right here. I don't know how well you can see that. Using a sharp X-Acto, simply cut down through the copper into the board below, and I'm always probably a little bit of overkill, but I always like to double cut it and then scrape out the copper between the two cuts if I can get it to scrape out. For me, this just gives me a little bit better visual indication than that trace is cut. I have to put on the other pair of glasses and get a closer look. So one of course the fun things about getting older is one way or the other your eyes are going to fail. There it went. I don't know if you can see that. There it is over here. It's about center of the camera. You can see the scar in the board where I cut that trace. That trace is leading into that 804667L. That's the character generator. That's the next bit of the mod. And the way I read the schematic here, do I have a pointer? Is the other lead coming out of the RAM would go through the switch. So if the switch was in this position where these two were closed, it would come into the character generator. If the switch was set where these two leads were closed, the original signal would come in. So I'm simply going to connect it here. Now I happen to know, looking at the other board, that this trace makes its way through the circuit to another spot, and rather than trying to like solder directly onto that trace, the character generator itself is socketed. I'm not going to solder directly the lead on the socketed part in this case, so I'm going to go back and reference the photos I took on the other system and figure out where that second lead was connected. So based on how the mod was done in my other computer and looking at this, the first thing here is that the piggyback location that I've actually piggybacked is here. So it's a little different than the drawing here. We've got the white wire that comes from my piggyback location around to that via. And then there's Z27, which is this guy here. It's a 74L, so it looks like 175. It's a 16-pin device. And that second lead is connected to pin 13 on it. So I will find a little stripper tool. I will strip a small amount of wire off the end of this second lead. Or a small amount of insulation, I mean, off of the second lead here. I will trim that down so there's just a small amount of wire exposed. I will come to that device, and in this case I am going to solder directly onto that lead. There's not a convenient via there, but it's this lead right here. Put a little bitty bit of solder on the lead just to tin it up. Bring the lead around into position, and I've got a nice solid connection. So hopefully this gets me the same setup that I have in my other TRS-80. It should. This matches visually what I have there exactly. It's got the single trace cut coming into the character generator here. It's got the via taken off to this pin, and it's got that pin taken in to the other pin. So the next step, of course, is to go put this back in the case, power it up, and see if we actually have lowercase. So the next step here is to put the system back into a case sufficiently that I can power it up. We've got our modified board. We will drop it down into the case like so. Go ahead and position the spacers. Pick up the keyboard. Slide this over so you can see the IDE cable. Slides on like so. Set the keyboard into place. The power switch is off. I always start with the video cable. As I said, always start with the video cable. That way I don't accidentally plug power in. I can see this is the cable coming out of the monitor. You don't want to plug the power cable into the video connector. It will wreak havoc. turn the monitor on. Here is the power cable coming around. And you will get to see first power on with me. Bring it up here where we can see the monitor. And obviously I've done something wrong. Quite interesting. Now the question is, have I got a bad 2102 or have I missed something? Oh, interesting. 5. I wonder if this is the issue where this has got the old ROM in it. So in this case, all the alphanumerics are wrong. You know, the numerics are there. The alphas are wrong. So the question is this the ROM? Or is this something I've done incorrectly? So, well, there it is. You got to see me fail again. That's part of the fun. I will take this back apart and do a visual comparison against the other board and just make sure things seem legit. And we'll go from there.